Or whatever you say, everyone. It's now listening.
Oh yeah, we're okay. Shalom, 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 shalom. Yasim aleinu, Yasim aleinu, Yasim aleinu, bracha v'shalom. Asher hashalom, Asher hashalom, Asher hashalom, shalom. Yasim aleinu, Yasim aleinu, Yasim aleinu, bracha v'shalom. Misamala miyamina Yisrael shalom, Rachamanu yiva v'chetamo v'shalom. Misamala miyamina Yisrael shalom, Rachamanu yiva Etamo v'shalom, ayay, 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 v'yizkuru v'atimu v'evanim, v'yizkuru v'atimu v'evanim, v'yizkuru v'atimu v'evanim, v'yizkuru v'atimu v'evanim. Ayay, askim b'Torah, Skim b'Torah u'mitzvot, Yisrael shalom, Yisrael shalom, Yisrael shalom. Tidina mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ay 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 Oh no!
There's another computer out there somewhere.
It's a quantum universe.
It's now inside the singularity.
Well, this gives us a chance to talk. Does this mean that like we're not being recorded right now? Or?
That means we're actually being recorded 5 minutes ago.
But it's great. If I miss something you say, I can always hear it again.
So is this us? Is this now?
Where are we? You figured that one out. All right, what do you guys have on the table? Like, what are you
I
thinking?
just grabbed the second chelik of them.
What's that number to me?
You grabbed it first. Okay. He's actually.
Because that was what was that hook.
Grabbed it.
I have a choice.
You got it.
Chumash the card. That's right.
Also, yeah, we've got
Kolotar Kula.
Kolotar Kula, and I'll tell you what I'd like to do is give just a context for the time. First of all, just the Zman that we're in of Chodesh Elul, and then what I'm actually interested in is Nativ HaShalom. I believe that we can have hashpa by learning appropriate things. And so even though it's not ostensibly related to the process of tshuva, it very profoundly is, as we'll see, from a deeper perspective. But I'd like to touch that. So that's with your permission, and that will involve us in the first chelik of Tivot Torah. All right, you never know when we get there.
You got it.
Even if we
just tell me around here now.
But
No, give it around.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll start. Okay, so let me in the Tivot Olam at the end of the first sefer. I'll explain to you a little bit of what brings me there on a personal level also. But first of all, it's just I think it's important for us to look at ourselves in time. Not everyone does that when it comes to Chodesh Elul. Chodesh Elul has the association primarily around Rosh Hashanah as a time of preparation for Rosh Hashanah. 30 Yom, Dorshim B'inyanei Chag is a cloud that Chazal have that 30 days before any Chag. So you're entering into its zone. So just like 30 days before Pesach, you're darshaning the halachos of Pesach. 30 days before Purim, you should be involved in that. 30 days is a time frame which enables people to have a proper preparation, and primarily I think that's because of the way in which the cycles of the moon function, and because the ability to be mekabel is really what we need to prepare ourselves to being able to be empowered to be able to mekabel the power of the Chag. So just as the moon goes through its cycle of receptivity and acceptance during the course of 30 days, so also we need 30 days like the moon does in order to follow its path of receptivity. And so the horror, that's where, as I learned from, there's no particular reason why it would be 30 days. They don't I remember they're not a raya afterward. It's like 30 days.
It's a 30 days is a recurring theme. It's not just in this context that they mention it.
Correct.
If there's a knius that's involved. 30 days.
Right, 30 days establishes something. Okay, but we're trying to look at how that's rooted in the nature of nature. That 30-day cycle is something which is reflective of the power of the power of receptivity. And so we want to be opening ourselves towards the particular light and presence of Rosh Hashanah during these 30 days, and that's certainly, I would say, the most common sense of Chodesh Elul, right? But there's something which has more primal origin in Chodesh Elul, and that is Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. We're in a very special, very, very special Tekufa right now. Really, really, really very special Tekufa. That is denoted as Chodesh HaRachamim, and it's really Chodesh HaRachamim because less because of the Rachamim that we ask for, and more because of the Rachamim which Moshe Rabbeinu achieved at Har Sinai from Rosh Chodesh Elul onwards, because in the context of the timing. So what's happened to us together as a people from the Vav Sivan has been a rather rough process in which on Vav Sivan we were exposed to the extraordinary power. Extraordinary is, just a kind of a minimalizing word, but the power of the presence and the vastness of the existence that is Hashem Yisbarach's presence. Existence itself is what we are exposed to. Anochi Havaya Elokecha, that I am, and that's really the translation of the word Havaya. I am Yud Kei Vav Kei. I am existence that is presented to you and present to you as Elokecha, as the power which you are opened and made aware of. That Anochi of Ma'amad Har Sinai is an overwhelming. What is this thing? Is an overwhelming. Is just opening of awareness to the breadth of all things, which tore Klal Yisrael to shreds, literally, as I'll say. Nafshi Yatzah B'Dabro, that we were with our souls disembodied B'Dabro when he spoke, because of this power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's exposing us to the vastness, which is just impossible for a creature of the body, of delimitation, and all the embodiment implies, of boundaries, of boundedness, of on the psychological level, of ego and concern for my separate self as a particular entity. On the physical level, just the extent of my physical sensations, right? All of these are just completely blown apart at a moment when Havaya Anochi Havaya Elokecha, which Hashem Yitbarach never revealed himself as Anochi Hashem, right? Anochi Hashem, right? Ani Hashem, that's one thing, but Anochi Hashem, which is a depiction of his existential reality, meaning the nature of his existence. So the nature of the existence of God, of Havaya, is this existence itself. So that just completely tore us apart. Our Nafshi Yatzah B'Dabro tore us apart, and we were really unable to go on in that condition. I'm emphasizing this in order for us to appreciate what happens later, because that Ma'amad Har Sinai was really one which very profoundly undid our own separate sense of self, and embedded us and wove us into just the vast vision of all that is. And so when that was over, in a sense, the writing was on the wall. Right? If it wasn't on the luchos, the writing was on the wall. That this was not something which was a sustainable situation. It's just not a sustainable situation. And in fact, that exposed itself and revealed itself 40 days later with the return of Moshe Rabbeinu to Klal Yisrael. And his discovery of the people dancing around the Egel, right? In the dance around the Egel. Okay, so that's the first 40-day period, really, of Moshe Rabbeinu there, receiving Torah, but receiving the Torah with very particular vastness, and in a sense, impersonalness. Right? Unable to maintain the separateness of personhood in that presence. And then there's the 3 days when Moshe Rabbeinu is dealing with the Egel and the Milashem Eli and the reorganization of the new situation which has been created by the Maaseh Egel, and then he goes back up to Har Sinai and is there again for another 40 days, during which he's mischanein lifnei Hashem for the repair of the relationship with the tshuva that Klal Yisrael has done to be accepted, and for his ability to renew the connection with that level of exposure to what existence is, in order that it again be speaking to him, so that he would have mitzvah to share with the Jewish people that they should know, in a sense, what existence asks of them, what it is that the voice of creation is as it speaks to us. That was lost and needed to be regained. And it's something also which we're not so used to. We're used to thinking of that 40 days being the time during which Moshe Rabbeinu was simply seeking to get forgiveness. But it wasn't just about getting forgiveness, it was about recovering the state of prophecy which he had had in order to be the channel for the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will and voice. That was lost too, because God said to him, Lech reid ki shichet amcha, you're going down. And as Chazal say, Lech reid means you're going down, meaning you are demoted in terms of the level of consciousness which you are at. You're demoted from that ki shichet amcha, because there is no sense, not only there's no sense in your nevuah unless the klal is able to receive what it is that you are now going to expose them to. There's no, I mean, what point would there be? What point would there be for Moshe to know it? I mean, it would be, a very elated condition for Moshe Rabbeinu, but only for Moshe Rabbeinu, and there is no such thing as only for Moshe Rabbeinu on that level of nevuah. There can be nevuah, which is a nevuah for Yachid. There are such things, a state of awareness which is on that level for a private person. But the level of Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah of exposing what the klalius hametzius is about, that's only if there's a klal which is able to perceive it, accept it, and be able to absorb that speaking and that teaching. So this is something which we're not used to perhaps as much, that Moshe Rabbeinu was not just trying to save the Jewish people as a physical entity, which was also at risk, but he was seeking to save the Jewish people as a mission, as the carriers of a vision, and as the recipients of this level of exposure to the nature of what reality is. That was something which was at risk of being lost because they in themselves had given up on it. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu had exposed them to the nature of what reality is in the way that Adam HaRishon had been exposed before eating from the Eitz Hadat. As Chazal say, that he got the exposure to all of reality, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took him on a tiyul to see and to come to know, and lost that in the Achilah Me'etz Hadat. So also the Jewish people had arrived at that level, and they lost it when they basically sought to remove themselves from that level of exposure to the nature of what is, right? As we've talked about it in the past, in this attempt to end a living relationship. Zemoshe Ha'ish, mate, he's dead. And there's almost something of a, I say celebration, but there's almost, something of a relief you can almost hear in that. He's dead. Now we can get down to just, an idle and a stable, static set of givens, which don't expose us to a dynamic reality in which the universe is forever growing, etc., etc. It's like, this is very upsetting to humanity. It's always been upsetting to humanity, and we prefer actually not to think about it, that we're flying through space at astounding speeds with the stars and all of this moving away from us. We like to think of it moving away from us, but we're still, but the stars, they're moving away. It's all in like this wild, frenzied motion that is very uncomfortable to cope with. But that the nature of existence as being in movement and in process is also part of the issue, which is part of the in sense of your soul being ripped out of your body. There's no stability here. There's no stability here because I'm not just because I'm exposed to the all, but because the nature of the all is so much in a vast movement. So all of this, right? All of this was, so to speak, chosen to be ended. With Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Ha'ish, he's dead, and we're creating something which is stagnant, stable, and can mechanically be operated, basically. So you know exactly, what it wants of you, and you act in accord, and everything is very, very neat, predictable, and encircled and encased, which is really the point of that first circling of around the ego. Just circle it, close it. Okay. So these are themes we've also explored them in greater extent in other years. But that was so this is, we should to appreciate where this begins. So this is where this period begins. That in Moshe Rabbeinu is for 40 days is b'tachanunim lifnei Hashem, that he should return this level of revelation, this level of exposure to Moshe and to Klal Yisrael. So this happens during that 40 days, and it's come to its end really on Rosh Chodesh Elul. Rosh Chodesh Elul is when the shift happens, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu indeed is now forgiven, has been mochel, and has expressed his readiness for this new event. And what I want to take a look at is those very profound moments, a bit of that in Chumash Shmot, where this happens, because it's very interesting you can listen, you can take Chumash. It's very interesting to hear what happens in Chodesh Elul, and this really defines the nature of what happens in Elul, also in terms of avoda, as we'll see. So Moshe Rabbeinu was there, and we're not going to go into the entirety of this these moments, but basically Moshe says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Re'ei ata omer elai ha'al et ha'am hazeh ve'ata lo hodatani et asher tishlach imi ve'ata amarta yidaticha b'shem v'gam atzati chen be'einecha. So
where are we?
We are now Lamed Gimel Yud Bet. We are after the Chet HaEgel. We are after Hashem has told Moshe that there's not going to be the level of relationship that has been up until now. We are after HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying that it's actually unworkable, because Rega Echad E'ele B'kir B'cha V'chiliticha. We're after the people having removed the Edi of Har Sinai, the crowns that they have received. We're after all this, right? And so now where we are is Moshe Rabbeinu asking for the recovery at some level of the level that had been there before. And so he says, you're telling me to take this people. You have not told me who you're sending with me. You told me that you know me by my name, or know me, love me in my name. These are all things that you said to me. If that's so, and then Moshe Rabbeinu does this really astounding thing. Hodieni na et drachecha veida'acha leman emtza chen be'einecha u're'ei ki amcha hagoy hazeh. So Moshe Rabbeinu asks of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hodieni na drachecha veida'acha. What is he asking for here? What is this request, and how is this How is this appropriate? So really on a very, very simple level, what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for is there to be a recovery of the Hodi'eni Na'as Drachecha, which in some sense was going to be the teaching of what Torah is. Because up until now it's been in question whether there's going to be a recovery of that level of exposure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways, of his drachim. And then Hashem says to him, Vayomar, Hanai Elechu v'hanichoti lach. So my face is going to go and I will guide you. Vayomar elav imein panecha hufim, al ta'aleinu mizeh. So not so clear what's going on. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu has just heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hanai Elechu v'hanichoti lach. Nevertheless, he says to me, imein panecha hufim, al ta'aleinu mizeh. Okay, I mean, before he's gotten already the promise for this. I'm going to go through this very quickly now, just to get into where we want to be for Elul. So Moshe Rabbeinu now seems to change the request. How will it be known that we are different? It's not enough it's not enough that your face be there walking with us and guiding us. It needs to be Balechtecha Iman. It needs to be that you walk with us. That is the shift. You're walking with us. Hanai Elechu v'anichoti lach is two separate entities, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sort of pulling the strings from above in a guidance which he's giving from the outside. Hanai Elechu, my face is going, I'm in the front, v'hanichoti lach, and I'm guiding you. And then Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that's no different than what all peoples have.
In contradistinction to...
I'm just reading like the simplest pshat.
But in pshat we had Anishalech Malach Lefanecha. At least there's some progress here.
I know, but I agree that there's progress. But nevertheless, that progress was not good enough for Moshe. And there's a very profound reason why it's not good enough for Moshe. But let's just wait a minute with that and see. But you see what he's asking. The only way that will be revealed that Matzati chen be'einecha ani ve'amecha is halo belechtecha imanu. It's as if you walk with us. Walking with us is different than him, so to speak, standing outside and guiding you. V'niflinu ani ve'amcha mikol ha'am asher al pnei ha'adam.
That would be unique.
That is unique. That he walks with us. That he, so to speak, is part of the same evolutionary process that we ourselves are in and growing through. That is utterly unique. That is a statement of the intertwining of the divine realization with our own process as a people is a unique phenomenon, the way that Moshe Rabbeinu was describing it. In other words, there's something which now needs to be given to this people, and we're going to see what a profound tikkun this is for so many things. But there's something which is so crucial that HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognize and accept here, that it's not enough Panai Elechu v'hanichoti lach. That is not going to work. The only thing that's going to work is Halo belechtecha imanu, is you're walking with us. That means that his walking is a walking with us. That means that something is shifting here, which is a declaration on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu, which has to be holding within it what is going to correct what had gone wrong with the first giving. And it's clear what's going on here. Instead of this being some kind of an external imposing presence or expansive presence of awareness and consciousness to the extent of nafshi yatsa b'dabro, which negates our own process, presence, and realization. This needs to be a recreated universe in which there's a derech, which we're walking on, and we're walking on that derech together. In a sense, what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing, if you listen carefully, he's actually repeating what happened in Gan Eden after the Achilah Me'etz Hadat. Except he's doing it from a revised and sanctified position. In other words, with Adam HaRishon, the expanse of consciousness, which led him to being in a condition of, like Chazal described it in Chagiga, of him being from one end of the cosmos to the other. I mean, understand what this means. I mean, what does that feel like? To be from one end of the cosmos to the other. I'll tell you something what it feels like. It feels like something that everyone has experienced on some level or another when their awareness expands. I mean, you've all had some level of an experience of, so right now you're focused on me, and you're noticing a little bit, perhaps the fan and some other sounds in the room.
You noticed that?
Yes, of course I noticed that. But I had Rachamim on. You could just finish Rachamim. Okay. So, I don't know if we're having Rachamim on whoever's going to want to listen afterwards, but we're having Rachamim on you. Okay, fine. So your awareness expands. You become, and do you expand? Or is it just your awareness? What's happening? Okay, wait a minute. So now just, maybe if I stop talking in order not to confuse you with multiple awarenesses, right? Multiple stimuli, one which is beckoning for full, focus, and others which are beckoning for less. But if we were quiet, and probably also if the fan were quiet, then you begin to, you have not such proximate stimuli activating your awareness, but there would be more and more of a broadened connectivity to points that are far beyond the particular place that we're in. And just on the first sensory level, you might start to hear some things outside. You might sense a breeze is out there, even though you're not there with that breeze. You might allow things to rest even more profoundly, so that it's not just sensory, but it's also mindful to things beyond, things that you know, things that you don't know. You might discover at a certain point that you're actually able to see things that aren't here, to hear things that aren't sensorily present, as your what expands. What are you talking about? What just expanded? Is that me expanding? Is that still me, or is that some kind of extension? What are we talking about? So let's just call that awareness. Is that is that still me as it becomes more and more present to? At a certain point, you will discover that the more you're holding on to little old me, so the less you're able to allow that to expand more and more.
It's become diffuse.
It needs to become diffuse. It needs to be a non-local phenomenon. Non-local phenomenon. This is actually, part of what becomes so difficult for us to accept and to understand about awareness. I mean, after all, what's going on inside your head exactly? What is the construction of your brain? Is it the brain, or is it something else besides the brain? I mean, things I'm just describing now, which some of you might have had more or less expansive experiences of in your lives. These are real things. They don't seem to be brain functions, Okay, so I'm talking about things which are already like the parlance of current discourse for many years, but in terms of just appreciating what Chazal are describing about Adam HaRishon, to describe him as extending from one end of the cosmos to the other is to describe a being which is not a being, is to describe a being which is not a particular and local reality. So that on some level in the in the shift which he undergoes, which the Zohar describes as the shift from the cloud to prat of Adam HaRishon, that shift, which is in the Achila, then becomes a shift into specific and particular locus. But look, what becomes of that is a derech. What becomes of that is a derech, right? And then he's first time the Torah mentions that there's such a thing as a derech is after that shift. Okay. What I want to point out now is that the same shift is happening here. Uvama yivada efo, Moshe Rabbeinu says. How will it be known? So you're talking about things being known. If you're going to talk about things being known, then you're going to have to talk about things being known in a way in which there is distinction and contrast. In which case, really what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for is the same kind of particularization which Adam HaRishon had asked for. Except Adam HaRishon did it as an act of trying to grab something which was not meant for him as a way of establishing his separateness and independence. Moshe Rabbeinu, instead of, and it's so beautiful, he's repeating the same thing as Adam HaRishon, but he's doing it, it's just so beautiful. How will it be known that we have chen between us? If you walk with us. As opposed to someone who sought to grab of existence for himself and carve out his own being and independence in a way which was at odds from the wholeness of it all. A kind of a dot which will become that of judgment, of tov vara, of, as the Rambam describes it in the Moreh in Perek Beis, of a personalized relationship, as opposed to an awareness of. So Moshe Rabbeinu is also, in a sense, asking for that. But he's asking for that not as some attempt to grab that which was prohibited and in that way establish himself, but rather he's asking for a walking together with chen and with joinder of a joint unfolding and process. That's the derech that he's describing. In that, ani ve'amecha halo belechtecha imanu will be the da'at. It's a new kind of a da'at which is a da'at of love, of joinder, and of walking together. So I need to know your ways. Hodieni na et drachecha. I need to know your ways, God. Because the only way for me to be able to walk in your ways with you is if I know your ways. I'm asking you to expose us to drachecha, not in order for us to lose our sentience and presence, but in order for us to join with you in an unfolding. You hear it's a mamash parallel to Gan Eden, but from this place of the place of tikkun that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for. And the sod of it all is a shift into a acceptance of a process-oriented reality in which the openings are not of a ruptured sort, but rather the openings are openings which are of an invitation and of a walking together. It's very, I don't know. I hope you're touched by this. I mean, it's a very, very beautiful moment. I hear you, Hashem. But that's not going to respond to the need here. Panai Elechu v'hanichoti lach. The only thing that's going to respond to the need is if you take into consideration the chen which needs to be revealed, and the v'niflinu ani ve'amecha mikol ha'am asher al pnei ha'adamah. That there needs to be a sacred and special and unique connection between us and you. Okay.
Yeah, that's the question I've always held in this pasuk: is what's the nature of this yivada? Who's knowing it? Because it seems to be happening on two planes. One is purely internal.
Right.
How are we going to know in the full sense of to realize within ourselves this process that we're together, we know your ways and walking together. But it's clear in the pasuk that there's also an external knowing. How is such a thing going to be known in the world when the world sees that we're different? Right. Right? And that's why Rashi says the shot there is that Shuat Shekhinah up till now was in theory available to everyone. Right. And from here forward, it's going to happen within Am Yisrael. And it's just it's a fascinating and difficult, particularly if you look at the way it's playing out in our current context, is that when that Yivada gets lost from within Am Yisrael, the distinction doesn't go away. It's just that there's something else it rests on. Everybody's aware there's a distinction there, but the essence of it.
The harder we try, the harder we fall.
Yeah.
It's like the harder we try to be like everyone else, the more it's in our face that the world won't let us. It's okay. All right, there's a comment. You're making a comment.
Making a comment.
And you're also wondering about
the nature of God.
The nature of da'at here is in a sense a parallel to the same kind of a da'at which is given to Adam Harishon but Bekul in a very selfish way, where it becomes tov v'ra, like a selfish teenager basically. It's like if it's good for me, bad for me, no regard, no interest, no concern for
what's a purely
the environment,
the
external consequences, external reference.
Right.
It's just it's a low level of maturity. This is the higher version of yivada, meaning that I am known. But my being known is not a being known which is a immature, so to speak, attention-getting, which becomes just this, in the profounder existential sense, this false attempt to create an identity by just being free to take what fits me, regardless of its impact on who's around me, but rather a yivada, which is yes an identifiable presence, but is involved in the all, with the all of existence, so to speak, right? Walking with me, which is an impossibility, but it's the interplay which really is ultimately the interplay which is called Shekhinah. But that is only possible if there's some kind of a point of distinction. Yeah. And that remains. And it remains specifically because we're a people that's committed to that. That's our commitment. That's our definition. Is that involvement? Okay, we want to be mitakev on this?
No, I just want to try to understand.
When we were talking about the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Adam Harishon in terms of this idea of differentiation, but in the case of Adam Harishon, it was him differentiating into the world without a relationship per se to the Kodesh Baruch Hu, to the Klal. It's just sort of like him expressing into the right, and in my own process of, you could say, self-actualization, one of the biggest things that has hit me is at a certain point I saw that I was trying to remake the world in my image.
Mhm.
And that was not what self-actualization is about. That dream, that bigness, ultimately was just an extension of me. And that the real self-actualization actually occurs in relationship to the all.
Yes, very much, very much, very much. That's a maturing which enables for there to be chaim. Without that maturing, there can't be chaim. We all know something of what chaim is, right? It's exactly when the child becomes self-conscious. It's exactly when the person becomes self-involved, or notices that you've noticed that they lose all chaim. So that's part of the beauty of what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for. It's like the only way that it's going to be real, that we're not here as some kind of preachers to humanity, which is a false vision for Klal Yisrael, but rather we're joined with all of existence in its derech of realization and evolution. So then we're joined, and you're part of that.
So just living you.
Yeah, we're living you, and you send your eyes up, and we're living you, and I put my eyes down too. But we're not living you instead of you. We're all part of this path that we're on. But there's no question that the uniqueness of the consciousness and the awareness of the Jewish people is this very, very, very intimate involvement in that. An intimate involvement in that. There's always, it's just the nature of where the reality is built. There's we've talked about this so much in the past, right? That only through the unique and sacred can the universals become revealed and exposed. We've talked about that at length in terms of Yaakov Avinu, etc. But that's very clearly what's going on here, I believe, and that's mamish the difference. It's like, but it's the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to stop being the preacher to the Jewish people, on a certain level, right?
External.
As an external guide, and rather he's walking with us. I know this so much. I think you know it. Like, I don't want to be too self-conscious about it, but people have brought it to my attention. Like, there's something about learning with me which is sort of joining in a path, as opposed to, I've come with the teaching, and that's why the dialogue is so elemental to the way we learn here. It's elemental. So, I mean, just a Talmidah already 7-8 years pointed this out to me, that's what she sees happening with people that get exposed to this. We'll put it like to this approach, right? It's like we're together in a path. It's not like I've already gotten it all, and now I'm just giving it over, and it's just taking me a long time to give it over.
7 years.
It's obviously not that at all, right? I mean, Talmidai Yoter Mikulam is a very deep statement, not just about the nature of Talmid and Rav. It's a very deep statement about the nature of the Bria and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Moshe Rabbeinu is introducing here. That's why, by the way, I believe this passage, you like this? That's why I believe this passage begins with V'diber Hashem el Moshe panim el panim kasher yidaber ish el reyehu v'shav el hamachane u'mesharto Yoshua b'nun na'ar lo yamish mitoch ha'olim. That's the parsha right before this one opens, because that's exactly the point. There's a shimush that's happening between them that is a exposure of the level of Moshe as a living human being that Yoshua is exposed to. The rest of the people is not really exposed to that. They hear Moshe's, they hear him after he's gotten all dressed, and he, steps out onto the balcony to teach the Torah, but that there's a human being there, and with all that implies, that only Yoshua knows. And I believe that's why this this whole section, it's out of place, this whole thing with Yehoshua, if you look back in Perek Gimel. Has to be the opening, because this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's asking for that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that rests on Chaim, that rests on a sense of us being together in a journey. If it's not going to be that, there's not going to be Chaim, there's not going to be anything sacred about this really. There's only going to be you up there, us down here, and you guiding us. Thank you very much. That's not what I had in mind. Okay, beautiful. It's not what I had in mind. I didn't mean that. Okay, then. Yeah. So you hear that, why that request is so crucial for what Moshe Rabbeinu was about to ask for. Because we want to walk with you.
Just as far as
it's so exciting. That's really exciting. It's like really exciting to be walking with a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In that sense of walking with a HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really exciting. It's like, it's the same. It's a similar excitement and sensation to that kind of expanded awareness. Which, like, where do I end? Where do I end? Well, right now I end, with listening to this particular voice that I'm listening to and me speaking these particular words that I'm speaking. That's where I end. But I know that there are times when I don't end there. I don't end there. So just the way you say spatial, I don't end there. It's also temporal. I don't end there. It's like this. Suddenly, you get this very, very extended sense of it. It's really oddly, right? It's really, even though it's very, very quiet. In order to touch that place, at least in my experience, it's extremely exhilarating. At once, it's like inappropriately exhilarating. Like I'm not doing anything. Maybe if I was dancing up and down, yelling,
No.
Thank you. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, but okay. Maybe if I was doing that, or it won't be even worse than that. But like, okay, thank you. But like, maybe if it was just like this, exhilarated, emotional experience, right? Then I'd understand why I'm so exhilarated. But then that exhilaration, I'm sorry guys, but that's just the way I see it. It's like whether it's strumming guitar, whether it's whatever it is, right? So that emotional exhilaration has oftentimes the opposite impact. It's not expansive. You're very, very excited. Mm-hmm. But we're not talking about getting very, very excited. We're talking about elation. Is the word I would use. We're talking about elation. And to be elated is a different experience than to be exhilarated in that sense. To be elated has to do with expansiveness. And that's why true music, or not true music, all music is true, fine, etc. But the music that brings the Shekhinah has to be a kind of a music which creates an elated awareness. But what happens is the exhilaration and the elation around that, and the expanded awareness that comes with that, is not only spatial. I'm saying it's also temporal. And then you realize that like there's this extended self, which is going to be evolving over time, and that in the same way I sensed myself as touching the universe in that expanded consciousness, touching the universe, touching existence in that. So also in that process over time, I'm touching existence, and it gets exciting to pass through years, as opposed to
can't play tennis anymore.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Can't right, exactly. Instead of it being like intimidating or formidable or depressing or distressing or whatever. I was like, this is mamish v'lechtecha imanu. V'lechtecha imanu. V'lechtecha imanu. It's like very, very beautiful. This is how we walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is through that process of personal, national, humanities evolution. Okay, so this is really what Moshe was asking for. It's very, very important to appreciate. This is really what he's asking for, and this is what we're given as we're going to see in a moment, is what we're given at the beginning of Elul.
So, I'm still trying to how is this an act of rachamim? And it's struck that Ugus translates
I'm sorry, say that again?
Ugus translates as Yada Hacha Are Ashkachis Rachim which is not the simple. Later he says the Echon Aman the Echon the Irachim Aman Irachim. So it's not the simple. It's not just.
Okay. We will talk about.
So my question
how that's rachamim.
Like why Davka if this is what's happening in Elul and that the request is fame for Yibadai Fukinasati Chem Yenecha Midanecha, that aspect, why is it rachamim? I suppose we just haven't.
Okay, I'm really not there yet, but right now it's with the chen. With the chen, I think the important point here is what Moshe Rabbeinu. This is really amazing, to be asking for chen. That is what I know that you have informed me. But it's only going to be known if you're walking with us. So I just wanted to say that also as a little bit of a run, a way of being, a way of being. I think people sense that when you're joined with them in process and in journey, people sense that, and that's actually one of the deep ways in which chen happens. It happens between us and a baby child who's not claiming anything for itself, and it can happen between two human beings, being a man and a woman. It can happen. It's what holds a marriage together. Literally, it's what holds a marriage together, because it's only in that experience of I'm not there and neither are you. We are on a path together, and with all the mutuality that implies, and all the interaction that implies, all the sharing that implies, the point of contact and connection. Okay. So then, so we're other.
I wanted to hear more about how this looks, because in the text so far, at least, I haven't seen the shift yet, and also in the way that it's lived, per se. In other words, we still, how do we get this money? How do we see this in the kind of yom-yomi of general halachic Shulchan Aruch Jewish life that we have? Is there really I didn't
definitely
sense that shift.
You're asking a question that's really beyond the text, but you're wondering if this belechticha has anything to do with halacha. I mean, it does, etc. But you'd like to know how that's experienced.
How that's experienced. If this was really answered.
So it's totally that way for a person who's learning. I think you're correct that it's not that way for someone who lives out of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. But nebech, if that's what he has to live, that's what he has to live. It's better than falling off the derech.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of a level of being joined with the evolution of Hashem's drachim is absolutely inextricably related to Amal B'Torah. Absolutely, you really cannot live the Belechdecha Imanu unless you're Amal B'Torah on some level. I mean, God says it to us. Im b'chukotai telechu, v'et mitzvotai tishmuru v'asitem otam. So immediately Chazal says clearly b'chukotai telechu is not halacha. It's weird. It's not kiyum ha-mitzvah, right? It's obviously not kiyum ha-mitzvah. But I don't think it's just from a diuk in the pasuk. The diuk in the pasuk is always the anchor, exactly. But it's diukim and psukim are exactly this. It's like you think that if you figure out what Rashi's asking and then you understand what his answer to the question was, so then you think you're done. You haven't even started. That's just technology. What is the existential statement being made in that? And the statement that's being made is, before you can be shomer mitzvot in any meaningful fashion, You have to be b'chukotai telechu. You must.
So it's the
Which
same
are-
language.
It's exactly the same language. The only way to walk is by an ever-expanding awareness, understanding. Not because now you know more. That's another mistake people make. Now I know more. It's not that now you know more. It's
Now
like,
you're in the conversation as opposed to just.
you're now in
told
the
what to do.
conversation. You're shifting all the time. So obviously you have to constantly be involved in Torah, because the Torah that's now there for you is totally different than what it was yesterday, because you've changed. If you're unwilling to see yourself as a changing, dynamic reality, then your best bet is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. But it becomes your Egel Azav. It mamish becomes an Egel Azav. It becomes an Egel Azav because it's nothing but an attempt to keep things static when it becomes that. That's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu says. They started to worship that. Don't do it. Don't fall back on their error. So that's crucial, but not because now you're learning more information, but because you constantly, in the amal of Torah, exposing yourself to Torah, because that's the place where you walk together with God. That's the place where you walk together with God. That's where the exposure of your current self to God's current self, so to speak, kiviyachol, right, in the realms in which He reveals Himself, happens. And the kiyum of mitzvah is not where it happens. The kiyum of the mitzvah then becomes the mode through which that consciousness becomes expressed and revealed. That's the only way to, mamish, the only way to doing it with any kind of exhilaration. That's real. That's real simcha, and not just let's get into it. Get into it and play some really hard music and get dancing and get going, and then we're going to be happy about it. You're not going to be happy about it. I mean, you'll be exhilarated about it. You're going to be happy about it. Simcha has to do with the awareness of me touching what is real right now. It's touching real right now. It's alive right now. Chazal say this: Shechiyanam kimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh is a bracha that's made on simcha when something new has suddenly exposed itself to you. What does that have to do with simcha? Why does its newness have to do with simcha? Because that's when you get exposed to what's right now. So just getting excited and playing, great music and singing great songs, and that's not going to make you happy. That might have to do with gila. It might have to do with ditza. It has to do with other things. There are other things that are good to have. They're good to have. But simcha is simcha something else. How do I know this? Because simcha is indelibly related to nevuah and ruach hakodesh. And you're not going to get it by all the hard dancing. The simcha that brings the Shekhinah and the ruach hakodesh and that expanded awareness is a very particular one, which has to do clearly with your expanded awareness. So where's that going to come from if you're still stuck in what you were yesterday and just trying to hang on for dear death, basically? How low do you hear that? So the question then becomes, rebounded to you. In other words, the answer is you're not going to find it in the Kiyum Halacha unless the Kiyum Halacha is brided together with the Torah. It's not going to happen. Because there is no real simple shel mitzvah unless the music's playing. So the Gemara Mefureshet. And what the music is doing is expanding your awareness. That's what it's doing. There is no simple shel mitzvah without that. It's mashma. Mashma the Gemara. Simple shel mitzvah is vayikin again and again. You turn the music off, so there's nothing there. The music is this. Torah is the shira. The mitzvahs are not the shira. The mitzvahs aren't the song. The Torah is the song.
It's a deep calling. I feel like it's hard just as the way Jewish life is lived in the shuls and daily processes.
Totally. Totally. Look, and we all fall there. We all fall there. Believe me. It's not like, it's not here I am giving it to you, right? But it's a lot of work. it's an ongoing struggle to stay awake. The struggle to stay awake on certain levels, yeah, but I was like, Mamish, I was writing about this because like I'm right now in a Machzir Shchinasu L'Tzion. Like, what does that look like? Machzir Shchina? What does that look? What is that like? And where are we supposed to be standing when we get there in the Shmoneh Esrei?
Like Poland.
Where do we get there? So Mamish, like I'm writing about this, I'm sitting like writing about this, and then we have someone who's like he's a Gavaldic guy who grew up in Mea Shearim. He's probably in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. Breslover. Mamish like Yerushalmi, he's like he just happened to marry this woman who wanted to live in Bahrain, but he's like, but he's got a beautiful sweetness to him. Anyhow, so he was very important for the Gemara. The Asra should come to the bris of his grandson that they were going to make in their house. Okay, so I pull myself away from writing about this expanded consciousness of Matzah Shchines, and I go into this bris with all these Yerushalmi, and like really, mamish. I'm not saying that this is the way it is for everyone, etc., etc., but it's like smoking, obese. 30 seconds before the bris. It was this like going. It's like totally a pandemonium of insensitivity. It's like what is going on? Like this in this space. Like, does this have anything to do with what I was just writing about? I mean, is this what it looks like?
There's some crude improvement.
It's a good limud schus. How did you bring so many angels? Okay, but like, and more. I'm not going to go into the whole. I was just like,
And more.
what is this? Like, what is this? Okay, what is this? So so we have a mission. We have a mission. But this is Moshe Rabbeinu's request. I know what the eagle can look like. I know what this can look like, if that's what it ends up being. Because you, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kiviyachol, think that now it's just a matter of telling them just tell them what they need to do. I see what they want. They just want to be told what they need to do. Okay, Panay Elechu Vanichoti Lach. I will guide them. I want that. I want to know your ways because I want to join you on the way. So this is what's happening now. This is mamish what's happening now. This is the calling of this time. This is mamish. It's happening right now. It's like in these first days of Elul, like Chodesh Elul, like this is happening. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu responds and he gives it to him, etc. And then he asks for more, and we're not going to go into this. And then he says, "Ani avir kol to the alpanecha." All right, I think actually maybe this is probably enough for now, and we'll come back to this. I see where we're going. Whatever. I don't know why I'm looking for instructions from you. It's whatever it is.
Can we tease something apart that's just really important?
Okay. What I just wanted to say. Maybe we'll do the middle passages in a coming sitting. But I just want to say, look what happens, just so you appreciate what's just gone on. So we'll make a little bit of a closure on today's statement, right? So he's gotten this, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu responds, and then Moshe Rabbeinu asks for something else, and we'll go into what else he's asking for, and also the way Hakadosh Baruch Hu reacts to that. But just take a look at the words here. So Moshe Rabbeinu asks, "Harini not kodecha." But excuse me. Let's just start from the new parsha of Yud Zayin. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Gam et hadavar hazeh asher dibarta easeh ki matzata chen b'einai va'eda'acha b'Hashem. Okay, I know you by your name. And this thing with name is obviously very extant here. What's the name thing? I know your name. You know my name. I'm going to call my name. Because now he says, Harini nat kodecha, in Pasuk Yutet, Vayomer ani avir kol tuvi al panecha, v'karati b'shem Adonai lefanecha, v'chanoti et asher achon, v'richamti et asher arachim. I'm going to pass all of my goodness over you, which the Rambam says means all of my goodness. What's that? Kol tuvi. Well, what it says in the Chumash it is, which is that God saw everything that He had made, and it was good. As Hashem is kol asher asa, v'hinei tov me'od. So any of your kol tuvi is broadening Moshe Rabbeinu's awareness to see everything, to be with everything now. Right? That's what's actually happening here. V'karati b'shem Hashem lefanecha, and I will call out my name. Now, v'karati b'shem Hashem lefanecha is different opinions about who's to call the name. Who's to call the name. The pashtus of the pasuk really is that God is continuing to speak about Himself, and that indeed is what's going to happen. Because if you look ahead to pasuk Hey in the next parak, Vayered Hashem be'anan, Vayityatzei v'mosham, Vayikra b'shem Adonai. It's just as ambiguous, but the Mefarshim who say Vayikra b'shem Hashem, which seems to be the more present in Chazal interpretation of what happens here, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu calling out b'shem Hashem, fulfilling what He said He was going to do. V'karati b'shem Hashem, Vayikra b'shem Hashem. So the fulfillment of this, right, is happening here. It's happening here. So what's all the stuff in the middle? Isn't it interesting? I mean, let's have a narrative that holds together. You know, Hashem said, "I'm going to call out my name," and He actually does it in pasuk Hey. So Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Solach שני לוחות אבנים כראשונים וכתבתי על לוחות הדברים אשר היו על לוחות הדברים אשר שיברת ויהיה נכון לבוקר ועלית בבוקר על הר סיני ניצבת לי שם על ראש ההר. He's like, what? Like, וימסול שני לוחות אבנים כראשונים וישכם משה בבוקר ויעל על הר סיני כאשר ציווה השם אותו ויקח בידו שני לוחות אבנים. Like, what's going on? Like, why is this in the middle? Why is it in the middle? You see clearly. It's so deep. What's in the middle here is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's changing the terms of Matan Torah. He's now going to give him a Torah that is written on luchos that Moshe Rabbeinu carves out. Absolutely. I'm going to put you into the crevice of the stone.
That has been hollowed out.
Okay, there's definitely something going on there, but the element that is of interest to us here is this stone, which the first time God gave the Torah was something that He Himself carved out, but now it's psol lecha. Now it's psol lecha. This is Hashem's response to Moshe Rabbeinu's request. You know what? If you're asking for halo b'lechtecha imanu, then this is going to have to involve you from the very beginning. The material that the Torah is going to be made of is you. You are the stuff of the process. So lecha, you've got to carve it out. And only on that will I be able to write. It's only if you carve it out. I've seen it. We tried it the other way, so to speak. So that means it's your life. That means it's your desire. That means it's your mode. When you are in an expanded and real state, then you are the material on which the Torah is going to be written. You're the material of which the Torah is written. That is a calling to yourself, to your identity, to the realness of who you are. Only being able to be discovered, you can't discover it as some separate reality. You can only discover it as joining with existence in its unfolding. So you've got to be real. You've got to know what life is about on some level. You've got to know what existence is, what realness is. You've got to have the exposure to that. I need to know your ways, God, so that I can become what it is that I'm created to be. Hodieni nadrachecha.
Not comparing myself to Moshe Rabbeinu, what does that say about the impact that we can have in a living relationship with Baruch Hu about the real new unfolding of reality and existence as we touch that and as we engage, and as we have new requests and needs that evolve, that reshape,
that reshape the world.
That reshape the world. It's an intense thought.
It's very intense.
Can you give an example of when you say like new things?
So let me. Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, like in the same way that through Moshe Rabbeinu's request of Baruch Hu, if I'm hearing it correctly, that he himself became the material, so to speak, of the Torah. What does that mean about us in the requests when we're in that kind of partnership with Baruch Hu that gets what's the new luchot? What's our new luchot, so to speak?
Yeah, and it itself is. I know he hasn't given you an example yet. I'm about to. That becomes intertwined with the nature of reality itself. It's this very profound zivug that happens between what we become and then what reality becomes, and what reality has become, and therefore what we become, and what we become, and therefore what reality becomes. It's impossible to delineate in some kind of chronological format. This is something which is really walking together. It's very, very beautiful. But it's only beautiful in as much as it is awake and aware. When you close down into your myriad selfish and self-involved egotistical issues, then that's not where it is.
So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that's not where it is. That's just you self-involved.
And
the more self-involved you are, by the way, so the more cut off you really become. The more cut off you really become, which means essentially the more mortal you become. Not just in the sense that you have less years, which might also happen, if it gets to the point of kares or whatever, but in the sense of you're cut off from the all, which is the way the Rambam describes it in Vostuba. You become cut off from the all. That's what he says is the worst possible consequence of living wrongly is you become cut off from the vastness of it all, from this kol tuvi. You become cut off from that. But when you're in a bright and aware condition, when you're involved in a deep way in Torah learning that is expansive, and your own discoveries of love and care in an expansive way, so then yeah, it's totally. Where does your self end? Where does my self end? Does it end as far as my vision goes? Does it impact as far as my vision goes? Yeah, it does. It does. It does. That's the great promise here. Yeah.
This parallel process
I'm sorry about Adam Arishon? Yeah.
Expansiveness which often failed, and the same process happening here. And it almost seems like that failure is somehow part of the process. That comes from, so to speak, you learn from this mistake. And right away have given the Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu, this left the cup kind of. So I had to first have been, okay, we're going to try this one way, and you're going to fail, and then you have to come back and request it by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what's good, what's part and parcel of the process versus it could have been otherwise.
Okay, so these are big questions, but I hear you wondering about this phenomenon which seems to repeat itself. There's a very expansive consciousness which needs to be delineated and made specific. Happened in Gan Eden, and now it seems like Baruch is trying to do the same thing and making the same error, right, so to speak. Right? What's the okay? So that's that is a way of looking at it. If you look at a Kodesh Baruch who's trying, right? Mm-hmm. But if and I understand this is what you're looking for. There's something existentially so about the nature of the way existence is such that it can be existence, such that existence can be given, that requires this. And to put it very succinctly, for it only to be that expanded reality of complete merger is, in a sense, for it to be nothing at all. It is no thing. The only way for existence to be shared with something which is extant of its own is for that which is extant of its own to have its own powers of process, will, purposiveness, life. Yet there seems to be something of the exposure to that consciousness, and then the moving away from it, that is part of the way that can be given. Were it only in the specific and particular, then there would not be this recognition and awareness, which is hakaras hatov ultimately. Hakaras hatov, which is really hatov shimcha l'chanei lahodos, is our attempt to reconstruct what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what I think. Like hatov shimcha, it's the only place in the whole Chumash where God's name is called good. He says, "Ani avir kol tuvi al panecha, v'karati b'shem Hashem." You can say those are two different things. You can say those are one thing. If you say they're one thing, then when we say hatov shimcha l'chanei lahodos, basically what we're saying is we have a level of hakaras hatov which is able to expose ourselves to this vastness of it and our participation in it, which enables us then, when we become specific, to not falsify that specificity into being some kind of discrete particle that's lost its participation in the all. So in a sense, we need to be exposed to both. It's not like Kodesh Baruch Hu made a mistake. It's that in order to achieve, ultimately, Halo B'lechtecha Imanu, we have to also have that capacity of the vastness of our being as being completely at one with the allness of existence. Because if you don't have that, then it just becomes, okay, just tell me what to do. Right? It just becomes my own self-realization, self-actualization.
Not a relationship.
There's nothing there between me and the universe. There's just me.
Isn't that all there is?
No, it's only
I thought you moved beyond that, Eitan.
You tried that.
That's actually a trick question. But I'm not going to go there. But you hear what I'm saying? So like, it could be looked at as he tried it and it didn't work. No, it's built in. I understand. I understand that you recognize that. I understand that. I'm just using for the didactics of it.
Well, I mean, it also feels like it seems like a person, like a child, goes off the well kid once they have this stage.
Yeah.
They're going to be failed, and you have to go through that process to get maturity.
It is. It's built in.
If you don't have it, then you get
right. There's no skipping stages. Right, there's no skipping stages.
That's part of the mistake that it's about the reaching for that which they weren't ready for.
That's right. As if we could just
skip the end.
And then, which is what God says. That's where they're looking at it. That he's going to reach out and try to take life.
Right.
Which is what so many of us try to do. We're going to reach out and take life. But you can't reach out and take life. You can only live life. That's why it's B'lashon Rabin. It's got to be multifaceted on the temporal and the spatial level. Chaim.
Okay.
I want to push for something now in terms of making a bridge into a session in there, and that is just to to note something about Elul and the word and the capital Tehillim that we say during Elul. Hashem Ori V'ishi V'Mira. etc. Right? So at the end of it, David HaMelech talks about Ani Vavi, etc. Right? Okay, beautiful. Then he's got these Eidei Hamas against him, Hamas, and etc. And then he says after this, he describes this situation that he lives. He says, "Lulei ha'emanti liot b'tuv Hashem be'eretz chayim." Lulei ha'emanti liot b'tuv Hashem be'eretz chayim. It doesn't really. It's actually, if it were not, it's a hanging statement. Were it not that I trust in you, that I can invest my belief in you, God. Lulei ha'emanti liot b'tuv Hashem be'eretz chayim. And what? In a sense, the response to that is, I continue to hope for you. I continue to be in this kav with you, of movement. I believe that's a good part of the response, but it's not a full statement. It doesn't seem to be like a full statement. If it wasn't, it seems like, then I would have been lost. And in a different place where David HaMelech uses that same word, like Lulei Toratcha Sha'ashuai Azavadati Bo'oni. So he makes a statement, if and then, right? If Lulei Toratcha Sha'ashuai Azavadati Bo'oni, right? In my impoverishment of it. So I've been thinking a lot in both in this context, and also to answer you in terms of like, could you make this more real, right? Is a certain statement you can actually take. Take David HaMelech's statement, Lulei, but cross off Toratcha. And then take Az, and you could leave Az Avadati Bo'oni. But where's your Lulei? What's your Lulei? If it were not for I'd be completely lost. So this morning we shared on the big level of like the Lulei Toratcha Shashu, really in a very deep sense, the Shashuim of Torah, the Chain of Torah, the activity of Torah. Okay, but let's assume we all have that on some level, and now cross it off and wonder, like, Lulei, what would I fill in after the Lulei? I say that because part of what the offering of the Psal Lecha is that kind of a question. What are you carving out? What are you carving out? What is so existentially crucial to you that you can't live without this? What are you carving out? What's your stone that the Torah is going to be written on? What's your devotion that's existential, that your existence rests on? So the ultimate statement really is Lulei Toratcha Sha'ashuai. That if you don't have a renewing relationship with what's real and the voice of reality, which is what Torah is, that's renewing all the time, like playfulness is renewing all the time, you're a goner. You're a goner. You're going to be lost in just the stasis of death. Even though, biologically speaking, you might be functional. Mamish, but okay. So putting that one aside, I think that's a question that we might want to walk into group work with. So let's take a look at that, to explore that together, and share something. Yeah.
What would you want it to be? Or what
is it? What is it? Right, where are you now on the derek?
Tough questions.
Okay.
At some point, I need to talk to you about what you brought about Simcha, because like there's a lot of people who go to like festivals and concerts and dance really hard and experience this like excitement, and I would say even experience like higher states, and I always want to say, well, so what am I supposed to tell them about Torah? Right? They're like, dude, I don't need to go to a Hasidic, Tish. I can just go to a Fish concert, and experience that same thing there. So it's like, what's the ikar that Torah?
Okay, let's go for that next time.